We're going to be talking today about the difference that a social worker can make to an older person's life. And we're going to be drawing on some learning from this project, which is conducted by Birmingham and Bristol Universities and is funded by the NIHR School for Social Care Research. I'm just going to say a little bit about the project first, and then other members of the team will have a chance to speak. So about the Social Work with Older People project, it's a project that's really looking at what social workers do when they work with older people, and that's because social work is a really crucial part of ensuring people have a good later life. And older people are the largest group of people that social workers work with, but there really isn't that much research about what actually happens when a social worker works with an older person and the impact that that has. It's not very visible, so we want to shine a light onto that, both to be able to replicate and share good practice, to influence policy and education, and also to encourage social workers to see this as a really great place to work and to do social work. So what the project is ethnographic research, essentially observational research, in the field research of what social workers do. We've got two sites, one near the University of Birmingham and one near the University of Bristol. And we have a researcher on each site in a local authority spending time shadowing social workers. So they're shadowing, working with 5 or 6 social workers on each site, and they are just seeing what they do and looking at observations of practice, interviewing the social worker and the people around them, and also talking to older people and carers, and looking at documents and records and calendars to try to get a sense of what's happening. So from this, we'll have stories of what happens with older people when social workers get involved, and we'll also have themes around the capabilities that social workers use, the sort of skills and values and expertise that go into their work, the impact that they make, the difference that they make in the lives of older people, and also the context that they're working in. The fieldwork's been happening over the last 6 months, and as you will all know from your own experiences as social workers, that this has been a really difficult context, and so we want to understand how that impacts where there's support and where there's gaps and issues. So the people who are involved, other than the social workers and the researchers, are local advisory groups in each site to help steer the research, and that's made up of practitioners and people with lived experience. A national expert advisory group, again, practitioners and experts by experience, and that we've got some of them here today. And also there's a national stakeholders group. So from the beginning of the project, which was about 1.5 years ago, through to the end, which is going to be around the end of this year, we want to make sure that we're engaging with people across England to make sure that when we've got the findings and we've got products and messages and recommendations and things to put out, that there's people who are ready to listen and to take action. What we hope will come out of this, and what is already starting to come out of this, is for us to go and talk about what we're doing. This is our first chance really to share some very initial ideas from the research. We're putting out blogs, we'll be doing podcasts and producing guides and teaching materials and recommendations. And the idea is that those will be usable by older people, carers and the public, because older people themselves and their families very often don't understand what social work is and can do. For social workers working in practice, and for the people who support them, including education and policy and employers. So I'm going to hand over to Graham Price now, who's one of our experts by experience, who's going to tell us a little bit about what difference he thinks social workers make, and also share a poem from the project.
Hello everyone and welcome, and it's good to be with you. My name is Graham Price, as Gerry has indicated, and I'm a person totally without sight and joined the national group of, as a person with lived experience, what we call the advisory group. And very shortly after joining, we were exploring how we might share the information as we progress this research. I'll call it the sharing the know as we grow. But we're very keen for it to be more accessible to people as we develop this project, really. And I think Gerry, I hope, or somehow will share the website that we have that in fact holds blogs and other information as we progress. But what I decided to do was to try and condense the minutes of each of our meetings into a 3-stanza poem, and it grows. So it grows by 3 stanzas after each meeting. And I'm not going to spend all my time talking about that now, but other than to recite it to you. Bearing in mind, you will see for each 3 stanzas that represents a meeting and what we achieved at those meetings. It only picks up the essence of what we discussed. Clearly, it can't, in 12 lines, deal with 4 or 5 pages of minutes. But here we go. And the poem is called For the Better. We are looking to create a new beginning, albeit built upon the social worker's present craft, measuring the older person's sense of well-being when with them a social worker interacts. It's bred a research project of repute, allowing Birmingham and Bristol Universities to ply their skill, assembling a stakeholder range that avoids dispute, allowing all parties to profit their goodwill. Pilot study areas measured 2, one in the West Midlands, the other a West Country place. Geared to start in June 2022, as it unfolds, watch this space. In May, with the 2 research assistants in place and ethical approval nearly there, we've agreed it's people, not case, and meaningful engagement, the yardstick of measure. Equality, diversity and inclusion are to the fore. Accepting local demographics hold sway. Incapacity allowed for. It really will be everybody's day. Analytical frameworks will next be discussed when multidisciplinary involvement can be caught. Progress shared with a national stakeholder group representing us, plus local dissemination routes sought. Thank you for listening to me. What we were determined to do there was to ensure that it was person-centred, that we really pick up on the person being at the centre of this research, and much of our discussion has been placed in that realm. I'm going to stop there so that we can progress to Sonia, but thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Graham. That was great. Sorry, my prompting was a bit out of sync. I'm going to turn to Sonia now, who's another member of our expert advisory group, someone who's a practitioner and has lived experience, to say a little bit about, from her point of view, what difference a social worker can make.
Hello, I'm Sonia Clark, and I've been working for 16 years in the local county council in the older people's team. I work part-time, and I also had my mother last year come to live with me, so I've got the dual awareness of a carer and also a social work practitioner of many years. And I'm, like Graham, a person with lived experience, and I'd like to share later on how positive it's been to have input for my mother from a social worker's perspective, not being biased, of course, as I also work in the profession. So the group's been doing very well, and it's nice to see it progressing. So I just wanted to say a few words about that. Thank you.
Thanks, Sonia. I think what we'll do now is we'll hear a little bit from Laura and Phoebe, who are our two researchers who are in the field on site working with social workers, for them to say a little bit about some examples that they've come across around life-changing social work with older people.
Hi, I'm Laura Nosowska and I'm Research Fellow at the University of Birmingham in the School of Social Policy, and I've been working on this project since June. I came to the project not as a qualified social worker, but from a background in sociocultural anthropology. So I do a lot of ethnography and qualitative research of that kind. But what I found, I was a little nervous to start with because I thought, gosh, I'm not a social worker. Will I know what I'm looking at and what to look for? But I've actually found it very useful to be able to ask the kinds of questions that might be assumed or go under the radar if you actually are a practicing social worker. So one of the things I think that really came out was the way that social workers work together with other professionals in the field. So I think that the example I would talk about of life-changing social work with older people is one example with a social worker who I will call Imi, who is recently qualified. She's in her ASYE year. She's only, I think she's 28 years old. And she introduced me to a gentleman in his mid-60s who I will call Rod, who lives in an upstairs flat with his good friend Bill. And it's been a slow process of engagement for Imi to work with Rod. Rod ended up having his leg amputated due to complications from diabetes just at the start of the pandemic. And because of all the lockdowns and the way things were during that time, he found himself discharged from hospital, where he did get a hospital bed delivered to the flat, but it was put in the box room. So he spent then a year and a bit pretty much stuck in a box room with his friend Bill struggling to help him out here and there between being at work. Rachel, who is an occupational therapist, popped in and spoke with them about the possibility of perhaps moving to an alternative accommodation, like a bungalow or somewhere more accessible. But both of them were very wary about involvement of social services and shooed her away. A little later, this situation was allocated to Imi, and she turned up, and very slowly and carefully she reassured and engaged with Rod and also with Bill, because they lived together, to discuss possibilities. It transpired that neither of them had very strong literacy skills and had kind of fallen through the cracks in the system. They didn't have bank accounts and were kind of fearful of engaging with the kind of services that would make positive changes in their lives, like contacting a housing association, for example, or asking for help. In between times, Rachel, the OT, negotiated with Rod and Bill to get the bed moved out of the box room and into the large lounge, which had a lovely view of the street and the park below. This immediately improved Rod's sense of well-being and outlook. And then they arranged to have a big comfy chair, reclining chair, delivered, and a hoist. And that happened pretty promptly, and Bill was shown how to help with that. And Rod's life improved immeasurably, and Bill's life improved immeasurably, because they could socialize then together, and it wasn't just a matter of being one of them stuck in the box room and the other one wondering what to do in the other room. After much reassurance, Rod and Bill now both have the relevant ID and bank accounts set up, and are very slowly and carefully being encouraged to engage with the local housing association, and they are looking at bungalows now. And they're hopeful that once they're on a ground floor situation, that Bill will be able to go out with Rod in his chair and visit the club for a beer. So I think that was pretty life-changing all in all. And if it goes forward and they find a suitable place to live, it will be even more so. I hand over to Phoebe now.
So my name's Phoebe Vidal. I'm a senior research associate, and I'm talking to you from Bristol University. My tale of life-changing social work was told to me very recently, in fact just last week, when I was talking to Maria, a very experienced social worker, And she told me about an older woman called Gillian, pseudonyms by the way, who's in her early 80s. And this is a fairly familiar story of capital drop, where someone's finances become depleted to the point where the local authority has to take over the duty to pay for their care, and support needs. So this was the situation that Gillian found herself in when she first met Maria, the social worker assigned to her. Gillian had moved into a care home about 4 years ago in her local neighbourhood, but when her finances were depleted so that they eventually reached the threshold, it became apparent that the cost of the care home was £50 per week over the usual local authority budget. So after visiting the woman, Maria did an assessment and got to know her and got to understand that Gillian was a very devout Jehovah's Witness and was very well known in the area and knew the area very well because she engaged very regularly with her religious community in what she called doorstepping, which is the practice of going door to door and talking about her faith. Now, her faith was a really big part of her identity, and the doorstepping, which we're all familiar with, whatever we think about it, it was a really important part of her life. And since she became less mobile and was less able to get out, she had a huge sense of guilt about not fulfilling that part of her religious practice. And the way she overcame that was with the help of the care home, who in facilitated her Jehovah's Witness friends, brothers and sisters to come into their care home and have spiritual discussions, religious discussions. And this was very important to Gillian. The social worker, her skill in teasing out what it was, what the care and support needs were for Gillian. She had a dementia, although she had full mental capacity at the time that Maria spoke to her. But she did have a history of anxiety and depression. And Gillian to have regular contact with her religious community. And Gillian said of the care home who helped facilitate these religious discussions so that Gillian could live vicariously through her religious brothers and sisters. Gillian said of the care home, they don't share my faith, but they respect my valued here. So what Maria did, she did an assessment. She looked at the whole person. She was very insistent on looking at the whole person. And even though Gillian's physical care and support needs could have been duplicated in almost any other care home across the county because they weren't complex, there was no way that it was possible to duplicate that kind of psychological and emotional support. It says, I don't believe if you look at the whole person that the care she's getting now, which is meeting her physical, psychological and social needs, can be duplicated elsewhere. So what Maria did, she had to go to what's called, in this county that I'm examining, an enhanced peer forum, which is quite a high level meeting of 6 or 7 senior managers from the adult social care department, commissioners, other social workers. And Maria made a case that it was important enough for Gillian to stay where she was, that the local authority should pay that extra £50 a week, because if she was moved, she would be taken away from a very stable environment, an environment that provided routine, that was predictable, that Gillian felt safe in. So Maria made a very professional presentation to the Enhanced Peer Forum and asked them to pay the extra £50, which they agreed that that was a good use of public money, because they didn't want to see Gillian's quality of life deteriorate and her anxiety and depression get worse. So that's an example of life-changing social work, where in fact the social work is very hidden away. It happens in a back room. It's not open. It's not out in the public. Actually, nothing really changed for Gillian, apart from the local authorities started to pay for her care because she didn't have the funds to do it. So it was life-changing, but actually it was invisible social work that happened with Gillian. Thank you.
Thank you, Phoebe and Laura, for sharing those examples. So we wanted to give people a chance to hear something from the project. There'll be much more to come as we finish up the fieldwork and produce the findings and produce publications and so on for later on this year. But the idea was to get you thinking around your own experiences. And what we want to do now is to go into breakout rooms and to give you the chance to talk, be in smaller groups, and to share your own experiences and ideas, bearing in mind that life-changing social work, if you're a social worker, could be changing your own life. It works both ways. I've certainly met older people in my practice where things have changed for me, and I know that's something we talk about in the research team as well, that this research is by no means a one-way street. It's not that we're watching things, it's that we're being changed by things as well. So Social Work England, if you'd be so kind as to put us into the rooms, and we should have 20 minutes to talk in them before we come back together. We don't have time for feedback from each group, but what we are going to do is ask each of the members of the Social Work with Older People research project to say something that they would like people attending this webinar to kind of take away with them. So I'm going to start with Sonia, if that's okay.
Yes, I mean, it's just that element of seeing the person, as Graham was pointing out. And I mean, I've been a practitioner for 36 years, and it's that sort of basic groundwork, communicating with people, being respectful, and that is really the element basis of social work. Respect for people that you're working with.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sonia. Graham, did you want to say something next?
Well, all I'd like, I mean, first of all, Phoebe's camera or system froze, so I had to take over for a while. But that was really good, you know, really enjoyable and interesting. And in truth, what you learn from this engagement is that we are all changed by being involved in this process. And it is reciprocal. We all gain something from it, and it's and of course the other thing you recognise is the enormous resource intensity that's required here. It is a very difficult and complex. I mean, that's the other thing that comes through, is the absolute complexity of coping with it. So it has been quite interesting listening to expressions that came from our group. Yes.
Thanks, Graham. Phoebe, can you say something as your camera's working? Okay, go.
Yeah, my camera and my mic is working. Okay. So I've been sort of researcher. I'm not a social worker, and I've noticed how you know, there are many similarities in our professions about gathering data, gathering information, and I've been really impressed with how simple they make it look. I'm in a county which is covered in irrigation ditches, and occasionally if you look along you can see beautiful swans, and I think the social workers that I've come across are rather like these beautiful swans. Fantastic. They make it look so lovely on the surface, and underneath you know that they're working really hard, wading through all the weeds and all the tangles that are there. So I suppose my message to social workers really is, you know, don't be an ugly duckling, be a swan, rise up, show people how talented and how skilled one has to be a really social worker, because I think it's very easy to say, in fact, I've heard it, you know, relatives say, oh, you won't get anything out of her today. She doesn't like talking. But actually, the social worker will go in there and they'll use really high level communication skills to get information from somebody who may not have mental capacity to make decisions, but is able to say what they want and say what's important to them. So yeah, if I can use a mixture of visual metaphors, don't be an ugly duckling, be a swan, rise up and blow your own trumpet, and you know, demand the resources that you need and that you need to make your client, the people that you work with, to really improve those lives, you know, because I think a lot of social workers are struggling with getting through those weeds, but they make it look very easy. That's my message.
Thanks, Phoebe. Laura, what do you want to say?
Hi, I wanted to say that I think a lot of you are pretty amazing, and at the start of the research, when I said, oh, so what are we doing today? And I'm just doing a needs assessment, and I asked a little more and prodded with a few questions, and people said, oh, this is just what we do, you know, just on autopilot, this is what we do, it's just asking a few questions. And as the research progressed and I observed all the different, many and various skills that social workers are bringing to the job, they started to really clock on as well as to how fantastically multi-skilled and multitasking and massive stamina. It was just extraordinary, the level of legal expertise and knowledge required. They're experts in logistics, IT systems, software, troubleshooting, interpersonal skills, as Phoebe says, communications skills at an extraordinary level, diplomacy, negotiating with care homes, negotiating with families, negotiating with their own managers sometimes. It's just extraordinary. And medical skills and managerial skills. What else? I think the list could be potentially endless. So yes, I am amazed. Keep going.
Thank you, Laura. And that brings me to the last thing that I want to say, and then we'll hand back to Kate, which is if you are a social worker with older people, keep being one, because it's a great area of social work to work in, and it does make a tremendous difference, which you may not see always, but other people do see and do experience. And if you can encourage other people to go into that field, then please do, because we need great social workers working with older people. We all want to have a good later life. We all want that for people we care about, and that's one of the things that will help safeguard it. And I'm just going to put this up to share our website. So we are Social Work with Older People Research, and the website is swapresearch.wordpress.com. And the other thing that's on there is just to remind people that there is a capability statement for social workers who work with older people, and that was developed by the British Association of Social Workers, and it's again a picture, a list, if you like, a kind of view of the sort of expertise that social workers have. Thank you very much for listening to our information about our research project, and please look out for the findings and more information about it as we go through the year.